So quick introduction just about, my name is Marco. So I'm thrilled to welcome everyone here for the meetup tonight. We are here to explore the big shift from the PMBOK guide with Mike about from the 6th edition to the 7th edition. And Mike has been part and has been like a key role in shaping this the latest edition. Just like to have like a quick brief about how we're going to be working today. We're going to start with this introduction, and then right after that, we're going to be having Mike to take us through the presentation that he's going to share with us. And then, in the end, we're going to have discussions, time for the questions and answers, Q&As for around, right after the presentation of Mikey. So, please don't be upset if we don't ask directly to Mikey the questions right away. Of course, Mikey, if you see a question that you would like to answer right away, we are open to do so. But let's expect ourselves that we are going to get through all the questions by the end of in the end of this presentation. And then we plan to wrap up this session up around 7:45, 7:45. So this means in around 1 hour and 40 minutes. So before we dive in, there's like a few things, quick points I would like to share. This is a live session on Zoom, or it's not a webinar, so feel free to turn on your cameras if you feel like, speak up and chat with others. Also, let's make sure that for the sake of a good presentation that you keep the noise to the minimum. So if you are not talking, you can just mute yourself. And so then we are comfortable to listen to others. And then the last but not the least, this meetup is a joint effort between the Scrum Alliance and also the PMI chapter, meaning that join us tonight and also watch the recording. You can earn educational and professional credits, right? So we have more info in the details of this video. We're going to be sharing more. So now let's jump to this exciting insights, right, that Mike has for us regarding the PMBOK guide and about the latest edition. Mike, stage is yours.
Sure. Thank you very much, Marco. I appreciate this opportunity, and it's great to see some friendly names and faces. I appreciate you joining. Thank you very much, everybody I know, and welcome to everyone I don't yet know. Looking forward to chatting with you here. I just want to check. Can you see the slide, the first slide, Marco? Yeah, I got a thumbs up.
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, let's talk about the PMBOK guide and how it changed from the 6th to 7th edition. I've been a contributor since the 3rd edition and was co-lead on the 7th edition, which means I helped select the writers and got involved with the research that happened sort of before we even started the writing process there. I work for PMI as Agile thought leader, but I also have my own company, Leading Answers, and today's slides are a combination of PMI material and also my own material. So that's why it's kind of co-branded. My background is that, I've been in the project space for a fairly long time now. Started off as a software developer and then got into leading teams and then project management. I was super lucky to be involved in the creation of DSDM when I was working in the UK, working for a company called Data Sciences, who were one of the consortium members. And, I've always been wrestling with the pros and cons of rigor and creative license. So how do we tailor, and how much tailoring should teams do? And one of my volunteer roles at PMI was to lead the Agile Practice Guide, which actually has some Agile suitability filters and some patterns for hybrid adoption. And so I've really been involved in this tailoring space and hybrid space for a long time. And my last book, Beyond Agile, has a dynamic tailoring model at the heart of it. So, this is a subject that I've been wrestling with for 30 years. I don't have all the answers, but I find it super interesting. And I think it's, a great discussion for us to have. So I've got a couple of screens here, but my chat screen has disappeared. So Marco, if a question comes up that you feel like we should answer right away, please just interrupt me. And then I've got a couple of slides where I'll pause as well, and then we can perhaps catch up on questions too. So yeah, let's get into it. So the agenda for today, this is a high-level structure of today's session. We'll talk a bit about why the PMBOK guide changed, the new structure and its new contents, and then we'll take a deeper dive into tailoring, Agile and hybrids, and the pros and cons of trying to do that in our organization. So that's the idea. Let's start off with why the PMBOK guide changed in the first place. What led up to that change? This slide kind of shows the evolution of the PMBOK guide over the years. The first edition came out in 1996 and was just 176 pages. It was pretty slim. And then every 4 or 5 years, we have a new edition, and we invite people to contribute. And you'll see that the page counts get bigger and bigger, because it feels like almost everybody that contributes has something great to contribute, right? They have their own pet process or their own learning, and the PMBOK guide was getting bigger and bigger. And if we look at the number of knowledge areas and the number of processes that were in there, it was an unsustainable growth. And a lot of the feedback we were getting is that, man, this is sure an effective sleep aid, but it's just too much content to give to new project managers. And the other thing that was happening was that people sort of don't read as much anymore, or don't like to read, 700-page guides. So with the 6th edition, it was bundled with the Agile Practice Guide, which was over 200 pages itself. So we had about 1,000 pages of guidance for potentially new project managers. And the feedback that we were getting was, it's just too much, right? We need to thin it out. We got to make it more accessible. And so one of the goals we had for the 7th edition was bring it down to about 250 pages, right? So quite the difference. This wasn't an evolution, it really was a bit of a revolution. And man, did we feel that when we put it out for review. The review process was longer than anticipated because a lot of people didn't like the shift. And I'll talk more about that shift. Not only did we make it smaller, we moved a lot of the how-to process content from there onto a digital platform. I'm getting ahead of myself, but a lot of people didn't like it, but we couldn't sustain that 1,000-page plus growth that we had. And there was quite a shift in that we moved from knowledge areas and processes to principles and domains. And this shift to principles had actually happened with several other of our standards and guides at PMI. So instead of explaining the processes and give you a step 1, here's all the inputs, here's all the tools, techniques, and here's all the outputs. That's process driven. It's quite prescriptive, right? It's telling you exactly how to do something. A lot of these guides, like for program and risk and earn value, they shifted to principles. So instead, they would elevate the conversation up and say, well, what we're trying to do here is to guide the team to figure out what the vision is, or to work with stakeholders to determine the priority for the next release, or whatever it is. So instead of explaining sort of how-to steps, do this and then do that, we elevate that conversation and talk about the principles instead. And then it allows us to employ sort of the most suitable approach for our project and our team and our sort of industry vertical, right? So it's kind of better because it allows for local adaptation, but some people don't like it because it no longer tells them exactly how to do something, right? So they have to now figure out how to do this so it meets the principle. But a lot of people complained about, well, where's all the how-to stuff gone? That wasn't particularly new with the PMBOK guide 7th edition. we'd been doing that with several of our other standards and guides leading up until this point. It's just that not as many people read these, and so that sort of migration perhaps wasn't as well known. And so it was a bit of a surprise to some people, this move to a principles-based standard. But none of this stuff was kind of a brand new idea. This slide talks about some of the different sort of strategy decisions that PMI had been making over the years. There's this idea to separate out the standard for project management from the guide to the body of knowledge, right? That was one of them. And my mouse has just died. Let me just plug that in. Always happens in a presentation. Wireless mice are great until they run out of battery. There we go. So there was this first one that, yeah, separate the standard from the guide, and then also recognize the speed of change and how a lot of organizations now, time to market is so critical for them, right? So focus on time to market and also some of the leadership and soft skills elements. And then the last sort of big charter update we had as marching orders for the 7th edition was to not only go to a principles-based standard, but also be more accepting and descriptive of other delivery life cycles. So in other words, we've got to get Agile in there. We've got to get other adaptive processes in there. It can't be predominantly a predictive traditional approach with a separate Agile practice guide sort of tagged on the side. We've got to somehow make it inclusive of both a predictive and a traditional approach. And that was a challenge, right? Because the how-to for each of those is quite different. So by elevating it to principles, it allowed us to do that. So this is all a bit abstract. I'll get into the specifics, but I think it's important that we understand where the change came from. And we did a lot of research and contacting our members to figure out what they wanted. So we had focus groups where we asked people, how do you currently use the PMBOK guide? You know, is it principally a study aid for you to pass the PMP? Is it a how-to for your day-to-day work as a project manager? You know, what do you actually need to see in there? What needs to change? That type of thing. And then we also went out and, of course, reviewed a lot of literature and standards and guides and asked, well, what's changing in the, you know, the project management community, and what's new and exciting, and what should we be aware of in terms of trends? And we had a number of workshops, and I'll show you a little map of where they were. But to me, I created this kind of funnel metaphor to talk about all of the different things that went into the mix for creating the 7th edition. And we looked at, obviously, other competing standards and guides. We looked at, well, what's Prince 2 doing these days? That was my background when I was working in the UK before I moved to Canada. Prince 2 was what I used here. But, you know, it continues to evolve. So do all of the other project management approaches. And so we looked at them, we did our market research, we tapped into the expertise of our writing group, and we had some constraints though, right? We knew that we wanted to target this 250 pages. We wanted to elevate it to the principle level. We wanted it to be compatible with both traditional as well as Agile approaches. And so there was quite a few of these constraints that had to be applied to come up with the guide. And one of the things that led into this was this the PMI strategic plan, right? That talked about the speed of change and also fierce market competition. Now that you know, communication over the internet is basically immediate and free, everybody's competing against other organizations online, at least, right? So there's a book, what's it called? It talks about how everything is shrunken, right? So everything now, you're competing against everybody, right? The world is flat. That's a book I'm thinking of, and basically says, because the world is flat now, everyone has access to the internet, or many people do. You're competing in a global market, not in a local market, and so time to market is more critical, right? And so organizations have to get things done faster, and technology is changing faster than ever. So we had to be aware of that. And some of the other research that led into our guidance was the project economy, right? This is talking about increased technology adoption and digital transformation, globalization, nations switching to alternative energy while maintaining their GDP, right? And just the increase in the number of projects to do with population growth. The future of work is a really interesting piece of research from PMI, and it talks about how the people that will thrive in the future have a curiosity for learning, much like everybody who's joined this call today. If you attend webinars and events like this, you must have a curiosity for learning, and how we need to future-proof the talent pool. And it talks about adding a digital overlay on top of the talent triangle, right? So not only do we need to know about leadership and let's say business acumen, but we need to know about those with a digital overlay. So how will AI impact them, and how do we do effective communication when our teams are remote, let's say. And then the last one here, identify new ways of working, is a good publication as well. It talks about design thinking, the impact of artificial intelligence, and organizational agility at scale. So these were just some of the PMI research elements that fed into the 7th edition of the PMBOK guide, along with sort of independent market research that we were doing. And every opportunity we got, we went out and we asked our PMI members, you know, saying, hey, 7th edition, what do you want to see in there? And we heard these 3 themes repeating. One that is maintain and enhance credibility and relevance for project managers, right? We don't want, and this is where it's difficult. A lot of people in the tech space are probably not using work breakdown structures and earn value to track their projects, because they change very quickly in terms of requirements and technical uncertainty and what the customer is asking for. And some of those tools kind of rely on a baseline original plan, which is very hard to create when we have high rates of change. So, but if you're in the construction industry, then absolutely these things are critical. I've got a neighbor here, he's a construction project manager, and we always chat about how his stuff wouldn't work for my type of projects and my stuff wouldn't work for his type of projects, right? So we've got to remain relevant for a wide variety of project management industries and disciplines. So that's always a challenge. I think we solved it with Standards Plus, and I'll talk about that coming up here. But other feedback we received was, please improve the readability and keep adding more and more stuff to it, right? It's getting bigger and bigger. It's great for propping up your monitor, not so good for, you know, finding something in anymore. And also give us some good Agile guidance, right? There's so much guidance around different flavors of Agile out there. Can we have something that's agnostic? Can we have something that just says, here's a useful tool, consider this when you have stakeholders perhaps struggling to come to alignment on something, right? So we heard this feedback repeatedly: add Agile, make it smaller, keep it relevant, right? And we held a number of workshops. We didn't just want to hear about what people in North America are asking for. It's obviously a global standard, so we did surveys and workshops all over the world. And we also made sure that the people writing and reviewing the guide reflected different industries and different demographics too. So we had to recruit people from all over the world and make sure they weren't all in IT or all in construction or pharmaceutical. So we had quite the selection criteria to make sure that they were reflective. And whenever we do a call for volunteers, we get sort of an over contribution from consultants and trainers. And so we have to make sure that we have the proper portion of actual practitioners, right, doing that too. So it's a tricky business. It was the first time I was involved in that selection committee for writers and reviewers. And it really is quite the science in getting a balanced audience to contribute to the writing process and also, the reviewing process. But we had, 29 countries represented, 90 plus volunteers for the writing and the reviewing. And, we hosted global workshops in 5 regions. And over 500 people submitted comments to the actual exposure draft when it went out. And we incorporated their feedback as well. So if you think about, how do you come up with guidance on how to run projects? We've got a little survey we'd like to launch here. So Marco or Siri, if you could launch that first poll, I'd love to hear, how people, what they think about when you select or define a development approach for your team. So we'll just spend a minute here getting some responses to this. So what we're asking is, what is your goal when selecting or defining a development approach? Is it all about getting the job done quickly, trying to be as agile as we can, being effective, or following a defined, repeatable process? So I'm seeing the results come through. I don't know if they're public to everybody, Marco, or is it just me because I'm co-host, or can everybody see?
Oh, I believe everyone can
Everybody
see.
can see. And
Everyone
already
can see.
27 have casted, 28, 29 have casted their votes. We're good.
Okay, excellent. I wonder if we have some kind of influencer bias, right? When you see how some people are voting, if others then just join in, or whether everybody votes independently. But what we're seeing here is a clear leader in terms of we want to be as effective, right, as possible, delivering value and satisfying stakeholders. My screen is a little bit cut off there. Oh, I can stretch it out. Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's not all about time to market, right? Because maybe quality would not be the best there. And do we want to be agile? Well, if agile is our goal, but typically it's being effective is our goal, as we see by 85% here. So I tend to think this third option is really where we want to be, delivering value and satisfying stakeholders. And stakeholders include our team members as well as sponsors and customers and users. So and then following a defined repeatable process with rigor, clarity, and traceability. I mean, all of these have some merit, right? But I think for me, I would sort of tend to focus on the third one too. It's about being effective rather than being agile, let's say, or being meeting any approach, whether it's agile or predictive or traditional or anything else, right? We want to be successful. Alistair Cockburn had this nice analogy of software development, at least, being like a cooperative game where we want to win, we want to be successful, right? But we also want to set up the team members, the players, to be successful in their next game. So it's about supporting them and making sure that not only do we get the results that we want, but we're developing and protecting and growing the actual team members as well. So I think that's a nice analogy for what effective teams can be. Yeah, so thanks very much for voting in this poll. I'm going to stop sharing that, and let's remove that and move on. So we were talking about how we developed the 7th edition of the PMBOK guide. So it was a slow writing process. The writing team would write something, And then they pass it off to review team 1, who would review it and say, no, you've got all this wrong, or you've forgotten this. And we'd update it. And then we'll pass it off to a totally different review team that hadn't seen the first draft. And they would provide additional feedback and would incorporate that. And then the whole thing was collected together and put out publicly for what's called an exposure draft, where for a couple of months, you can look at a new standard or guide from PMI and comment on it. And that's where we received over 500 comments. And with it being an ANSI standard, the process for incorporating comments is quite formal. Everything has to be either accepted or accepted with modification, or deferred or rejected, and you have to provide an explanation as to why you defer or reject it. And then people can actually protest or complain. There's another word for it. And then you have to provide an explanation as to that. And this is why it takes quite a while. I always think, it's such a painful process, but it does actually create a better standard or guide than just asking 5 people to write something. These outliers and reviewers, they typically have a valid point, and then when you incorporate everything, what you end up with is a more robust, well thought through publication. But man, it is slow, and next year we're starting the research for the 8th edition of the PMBOK guide. And at the end here, I've got some information if anybody is interested in volunteering. But I would prefix it with, don't think it happens quickly, because it is quite the process. So that's how it all happens. And what do we end up with? Well, we ended up with the new PMBOK guide, which I'll talk about the structure and the contents now. But before I move on to that, any questions on anything we've covered so far?
For now, so far, there's no questions in the chat. No, Mike. Excellent.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So moving on, let's talk about the structure then and the contents of the 7th edition. As sort of I alluded to earlier, it's now really 2 separate guides or books, if you like, published in one physical document, whether you get the paperback book, here it is here, or you download it. It's 2 different things. With the paperback here, this is the 7th edition, and here's the 6th edition, and you can see that the top one that is a lot thinner than the old one, right? So we did succeed in making it smaller, and in fact, it is two different books published together. It's the standard for project management. That's the ANSI standard. And then we've got the guide to the project management body of knowledge, right? So 2 different things. It causes a bit of confusion because the page numbering starts again, like partway through. So it goes from pages 1 to 120, and then it starts at 1 again, which I think is dumb, because somebody says, oh, it's on page 52, and you got to figure out which book they're talking about within there. But that's what we have, and it's divided down like this. So the standard for project management starts off with an introduction, and then we have a totally new section for the 7th edition, the value delivery system, and it talks about how projects and product development are vehicles for value delivery. And this was one of the uniting factors or principles, if you like, to try and bring both predictive and traditional approaches along with agile approaches, because quite often how they do things is quite different. But you know what? They're both trying to deliver value. And so we talk about understanding projects as a way to deliver value, right? So that's really quite important. Creating value, organizational governance systems, the functional projects, and also product management considerations. So in the appendix of the 7th edition, we've got a whole appendix section on product management, right? And we got some of the authors of the product management books. Shane Hasty, the No Projects person, he was a reviewer for us. and also reached out to Alan Kelly. He wrote the Project Myopia book. And we also invited Mick as well from Project to Product, but he's a busy guy and he wasn't a reviewer. But we wanted to make sure that we sort of embraced, or at least talked about, product management as well as a way to deliver value in organizations. So yeah, this is quite different. And it's really the link, I guess, to Agile stuff, because a lot of backlogs are organized around maximizing business value, right? Or trying to minimize risk, which is really just minimizing potential loss. It's also a value-based view of prioritization. So lots of different, these are the main sections, I guess, in the guide. Value delivery, we talked about, and then project management principles, right? So these are the higher level elements that team leads and project managers can use to guide their behavior. So they're aligned with the code of ethics, and there are 12 of them. And an example would be to create a collaborative team environment, to recognize that project teams are made up of individuals that all bring diverse skills and knowledge and experience. And when these teams work collaboratively together, they can accomplish shared objectives that an individual wouldn't be able to do on their own, right? So 12 principles, they align very well onto the Agile Manifesto values and principles. We'll look at them in a little bit more detail next. And then below the 12 principles, which are kind of more aspirational or navigational, we've got these 8 performance domains, right? So these are really things that all projects have to deal with, and they include things like stakeholders, changes, uncertainty. All projects have to deal with these, and so it provides some guidance and tools for, good ways of trying to get these things done on our projects. And then we have this section on tailoring, which we'll be taking a bit more of a deep dive into, that we need to tailor our approach based on our organization, our industry, and then the actual project that we're doing. And then it provides some example models, methods, and artifacts. And it links out to this product called Standards Plus, or PMI Standards Plus, as it's called here, which is a fairly new electronic platform where we can share not only information and guidance as text, such as, PDFs and things, but also video and examples, so you can download an Excel spreadsheet version of something, or a Microsoft project plan, or go watch a video about something, right? So if you want to understand how to create a work breakdown structure, this is where that content has moved to. It's no longer in the PMBOK guide. All of the how-to stuff is in this digital platform, which is good because we can update it more frequently as new tools and techniques become available. We don't have to wait for the 5-year cycle for the PMBOK guide, right? But we can also provide a video on it, or an actual tool or a template for you to download, which we couldn't do before in the 7th edition of the PMBOK guide, right? So let's look a bit deeper. Here's the principles for project management. So these are the 12 principles, and I liken them to sort of stars that we navigate by, right? They're high level, kind of hard to implement, more guidance for us. So we use them to navigate, right? Be a diligent, respectful, and caring steward. Create a collaborative team environment. Effectively engage with stakeholders. So we're talking about demonstrate leadership behaviors. We're talking about creating a psychologically safe space where team members can contribute their best work. They don't feel bad for asking questions. They have that inclusion safety and that learner safety, and they're also happy to share work, even if it's not fully completed yet. So they have that collaborator safety as well. And we're always trying to improve and get better. So they have that safety to challenge the status quo, right? We focus on value, on creating value, prioritizing work by value, that type of thing. And this last one I find interesting is that the role of a project manager in helping with organizational change. This one's always been kind of a role of a project manager. It's not sufficient to deliver the project and then hope it goes okay. Part of our role is to try and grease the tracks ahead of the change, right? To make sure that implementation or upgrade or change that we're building is smoothly accepted. And we have that as one of the principles now, which is good. So yeah, these are high-level navigational. But the nice thing is that they apply to both traditional and agile life cycles, right? So it doesn't matter if we're, building a skyscraper or we're building a website. We can apply these principles to any type of project. So they truly are domain agnostic, and that's what makes them useful, right? At the same time, they're a little bit abstract, and if all you need is give me the darn template for a project charter, you're not going to find that in the PMBOK guide anymore. You're going to have to go to Standards Plus, right, to give you a bit of a template or the sections that you should find in a project charter. And that's where I kind of acknowledge some of the criticism around the 7th edition of the book, that it's no longer as practical as it was before, because we've taken a lot of that how-to content out of there. But we had to, because the project charter for your skyscraper is going to be very different than the project charter for your website, right? So I think it's probably on balance a good thing. So here's the whole thing shown together. We've got the 12 principles and they guide our behavior. And then we've got these 8 performance domains. And I just, if the principles are our guiding stars that are up in the sky that we use to navigate by, these performance domains are really just areas we have to go walk through on the ground, right? All projects have stakeholders, all projects have teams. Typically, all projects have to choose a development approach. There's some kind of planning we have to do, whether it's big upfront planning or whether it's the next sprint planning, right? We all got to do work and deliver value. There's going to be measurement, there's going to be uncertainty. And then to support this, we've got models, methods, and artifacts. They don't really all feed into measurement, as kind of indicated here. They feed into all of these performance domains. And then we're producing outcomes or deliverables. And it's all part of a system for value delivery within an internal environment and an external environment that needs to be tailored to make it fit. So that's the new structure. We got rid of the knowledge areas and the process groups and replaced it by principles and performance domains. And people are still struggling with it. So I talked to organizations that built PMO control processes based on the old structure. And they said, well, how do we translate this to the new structure? And perhaps the easiest way is keep your process. The 6th edition content hasn't gone away. It's in Standards Plus. You can still refer to it. And in fact, for anyone that wants it published as a separate document, we've got the PGPG, the Process Groups Practice Guide. So all that old stuff, the structure, I shouldn't really call it old stuff, right? It's still relevant. It's still a good way to describe how to create, let's say, a work breakdown structure or do risk management. All of that guidance, practical guidance, is still available in the Process Groups Practice Guide publication. But this was the old 6th edition. I created this migration map when I was trying to figure out where is all the content going to go to. And so the height of the section and the number in brackets is the number of pages that was dedicated to this content in the 6th edition, right? So we had an introduction, and then we had all these different process groups, and then we had the appendices on the end. And so, sorry, these were the knowledge areas. And then we had the ANSI standard. And then within each of the knowledge areas, we had what's called the ITTOs, the inputs, the tools, techniques, and the outputs. So for scope, we would have a description about managing scope. We'd have the inputs to managing scope. It would list, you might have a statement of work, you might have a work breakdown structure, or you might have a product backlog. And then the tools and techniques that you would use, and then what the outputs would be that would flow into the next sort of process there. And this is just one example, but we'd have the same ITTOs for schedule and cost and quality. And a lot of this content has moved into that digital platform now. The new edition, this is how it breaks down. We've got 40 pages describing the principles, 80 pages describing the performance domains, and then we have some methods, models, and artifacts, right? And we got the tailoring and then the appendices there. But a lot of this content has all gone down to the Standards Plus platform, right? And we still link to it in the 7th edition. But if you want to learn how to do risk management, then better to go look in Standards Plus, because you won't find too much of the how-to in the 7th edition guide. So this is where content sort of came from and moved to. So yeah, this was useful for us as we were moving things around to make sure nothing got lost. It's also perhaps useful for people that want to know where their favorite process group or description around something went to. The easy answer is if you don't find it in the 7th edition, it's most likely in Standards Plus, right? So nothing was ever thrown away. It's in there. And Standards Plus, if you haven't seen it, it's a free resource for all PMI members. And it's actually a repository, a digital repository for many of PMI's standards and guides. So it's not just the PMBOK guide. And this is a URL, standardsplus.pmi.org. And when you're in there, you see lots of different article types, right? So it might be a video, it might be an infographic or a downloadable template. You can search for, here we search for stakeholder analysis, and it brings up multiple things. So we've got part of the PMBOK guide here. We've got a video, and we've got an article or a webinar about it. And you could say, I only want to search the Agile Practice Guide or the PMBOK guide. So you can filter and search, and you can also say, I only want to receive waterfall or adaptive content back for my search, right? So there's different ways to slice and dice content that's hard to do in a physical book of 768 pages like the old PMBOK guide used to be. So it's nicer that way to search for content. You can filter and search your needs. And it's got a glossary in there as well, which is pulling from multiple different documents that PMI publish. So here we've got definition of an A3 and acceptance test-driven development. And these come from the Agile Practice Guide. So just to summarize that migration, a lot of it went into Standards Plus. The new 7th edition is a lot smaller. We've got new principles that are aligned much better with Agile content, but still work for traditional. And there's also this process groups, a practice guide, if you just want to see the old 6th edition content published as a standalone, how to do more traditional project management activities. Okay, so I think that's a good overview of the 6th to 7th migration. Oh yeah, these are the guiding principles. The how-to stuff is down in the digital platform. It's nice because we can update it a lot more frequently, and you can add the videos and the how-tos and the richer format guidance there. So, yeah, before we move on to tailoring and hybrids, any questions? I don't see any. Oh, here's one. It's done. Oops, it scrolled by.
Oh, yeah. Can you see? So there's a PMI Standards Plus open to add practice and lessons learning it. How is managed? Was it the process to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a team at PMI. I've worked with them a little bit, And they're absolutely updating that Standards Plus with new content. So if you have, here's the best way to create a product backlog. I'm sure they would love to hear about that. They're always adding new content, infographics, webinars, and things in there. So Ellie, if you want to drop me an email, my contact information will be at the end. I can put you in touch with who looks after Standards Plus, and we can absolutely, get you in touch with that process for adding content. And I've got another one here. Seems to have issued an invitation to project manager to get involved. Oh, interesting. Okay, sure. So I wasn't aware of that. So Agile Gothenburg, whoever was posting there, was saying that how do we make sure that the benefits that come out of our projects get properly realized? So and yeah, that might be beyond the scope of a regular project manager that is usually moving on to the next project, right? Once it's delivered. So how do we ensure those benefits are delivered? That's interesting. Rebecca, PMP certified in 2015. Want to get the PMP exam, must study 7th guide and PGPG. Great question. So yeah, if you want to get your PMP exam now, the actual input sources that the exam draws on has greatly expanded, right? Previously, people used the PMBOK guide as one of their main study resources. Nowadays, there's more than 10 inputs that factor into the PMP exam, including the Agile Practice Guide, and we've got a couple of Scrum books and other things in there. So we encourage people to, rather than sort of choose a version of the PMBOK guide, to go look at the exam content outline, because that really describes what's in the exam. And we are more deliberately breaking them apart, both the update cycle and the content. So the PMP is no longer a test of the PMBOK guide. It never really was, but people used to think it was, and they got away with that assumption because a lot of the questions did come from there. But these days, you've got to look at the exam content outline to find out what is tested. And there is a good mix of predictive, hybrid, and agile content. And like I say, there's over 10 books that the exam question writers draw upon to create questions. So yeah, look at the exam content outline. Cool. Thanks for those. I've got another poll for us to look at now. So if you could launch the second one, please, we'll do a quick survey.
Oh, I launched it.
Did someone have a question?
No, I think we just want to say the pool's out now.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're going to talk about hybrids next. So before we get into that, what are your thoughts on hybrids? Hey, this is interesting. So the majority, I guess, are saying it's the reality for anyone using Agile in a non-Agile organization. We've also got quite good support for a useful stepping stone, from traditional to a more Agile way of working, but perhaps not the destination, i.e. that we should perhaps continue to become more Agile or get to Agile. Not many people saying a dangerous compromise that erodes the benefits of Agile. A few more, though, saying it's an abomination of Agile values. And it gives an excuse, right? Or lets executives say they're being Agile when, in fact, they're not. They're they can sort of, oh yeah, we've got a hybrid approach. You know, we're using waterfall, but we also do a retrospective every month or something like that. So that's interesting. I think all of these are perhaps true to a little extent, but I kind of structured them in, I think, order of most likelihood. So you know, we've got almost that here, right? I think they are a reality for organizations that hope to be agile, but perhaps can't, or they're dealing with non-agile elements in their organization. Maybe the way projects get funded is, you know, a large batch process, and you have to produce some upfront estimate that is really kind of speculation until you get into it. Or the way that you report progress and issues is into a more traditional PMO that might be asking for phase sort of red, yellow, green type reporting or other structures, right? So that's interesting. Thanks for participating in that poll. I'm going to close that now. Oh, got another question here. The methods and so on in the PMBOK guide, are they PMI stuff or integrated, linked to others like Safe, Scrum, XP, etc.? Yeah, they're more the latter. We haven't invented a new sort of hybrid or agile approach and called it PMI's blessed approach or whatever. Instead we recognize and call out that, you know, Scrum calls its iterations sprints and has a sprint planning meeting to help kick off the process. So it's not PMI's own, it's really just the distillation and recognition of the other agile practices and ways of working out there. So PMI did acquire Disciplined Agile, which has a very large toolkit of ways of working and ways of improving the ways that you're working. So it does draw upon that, but we have Agile now is baked into a lot of our credentials and offerings. So the CAPM credential, the sort of the earlier stepping stone before the PMP, the project management professional, that has Agile content in it. The PMP exam has Agile content in it. We still have the PMI ACP, the specialization in Agile. We have the Disciplined Agile product suite. We've got Agile now in our program standards and guides. So it's kind of found its way into the DNA of all of PMI's products, right? And we've got other supporting things like Wicked Problem Solving, which is a great visual toolkit for facilitation and problem solving that works great in an Agile setting where we have a lot of questions and uncertainty. So I would say that it's really just the adoption of industry standards, right? So let's talk about tailoring, Agile, and hybrids now. In the 7th edition, we talk about this 4-step tailoring process, right? Where first step is to select the initial approach, whether it's predictive, adaptive, or hybrid. In other words, whether it's traditional, more waterfall inspired, whether it's agile, or whether it's some combination of the two. And then the second step is to tailor it for our organization. So are we in a highly regulated organization or industry, right? Do we do safety critical stuff? Are we FDA regulated for drugs or something else, right? What's our quality assurance procedure? What's our PMO, our project management office, or a value delivery office process for approvals, right? And then once we've tailored it for our sort of industry or organization, we then need to tailor the approach for our project at hand, right? So is this a big project, a small project? How many people are going to be involved? Who are those people? Are they new? Are they experienced? All of these elements, right, will impact the approach that we adopt for running our project or product that we're building. And then the 4th step recognizes that this is not a once and done, that we should continue to evolve our approach, our ways of working, if you like, as we learn more about the product and ourselves as a team. So, retrospectives of a classic vehicle in an agile life cycle, right? For asking what's going well, what's not going well, and what can we change for the next sprint or iteration. You know, are there any experiments that we want to run? Is there anything we want to start doing or stop doing, etc.? And so it's just recognizing that, yeah, that let's not reserve our process tailoring for when we know least about the project, which is at the beginning, but let's continue to learn and evolve and improve as we go, and then share those improvements with other teams that could also benefit from them too. So this is the process, and we see it described in the tailoring chapter of the 7th edition. You know, we have these 4 steps. Select your approach. We're going to go with this middle one, this orange one, might be adaptive, agile, let's say. And then we're going to tailor it for our organization. So we're going to change a couple of these cogs around. We say, yep, but in fact, we're highly regulated. So we're going to add on this hardening phase or documentation phase to get our FDA approval on the end of our development, just because that's the cost of doing business as a pharmaceutical company, let's say. So we tailor for our organization. Then we tailor for our project. We're going to cross out these 2 processes, but add these 2 new ones over here, let's say, whatever the team comes up with. And then, of course, ongoing improvement. So over time, we may drop something and we may add something else, or choose a different way of implementing something. So we see this in figure 3.1 in the 7th edition of the guide. We have the 4 steps together. So choose your approach, tailor for the organization, tailor for your project, and then this ongoing improvement of inspect and adapt as we go. I mean, it's nice that this is, for anyone working in an agile approach, this isn't rocket science, it's common sense, right? But I think what's encouraging is that people are using this in all kinds of industries, right? And we're encouraging this process of asking the team and getting them involved in improvement. And this is being used in construction and engineering and all kinds of different disciplines, which is great. So let's talk about tailoring in particular, and some of the different approaches and where it all came from. One of the first approaches I was exposed to was Alistair Coburn's work around the Crystal family of methodologies, right? And Alistair said, well, you don't have one process for all your different project types. Crystal Clear is for small teams, right? And it's light on guidance. So if you've got a small team, then you don't need an awful lot of description around how we're going to work together, because we can probably all chat to each other every day, whether we're co-located or these days, whether we're remote, but using, you know, Zoom like we are here. So Alistair came up with a family of methodologies, not just one. Crystal Clear is the book he published around the small process, but there's a crystal yellow and an orange and a crystal red and a crystal magenta. As team sizes increase, then the approach rigor and guidance levels also increase. But there's a second dimension as well that would also bump you up to the next one along, if you like, where he talks about the criticality of the project. What are we building? And if it were to fail, what would we lose? What is the impact of a failure or a problem? Is it comfort? If we're playing a video game and it crashes, it's kind of annoying, right? But it hasn't really cost us anything other than our own time. If this is email system in an organization, time is money, right? But it's not like a billing system. It's not essential money. And then all the way up to potentially, you know, we could result in a loss of life, single or multiple. If we're into air traffic control, pacemakers, all that good stuff, then we need additional levels of rigor, testing, traceability, to make sure that, you know, we're applying due diligence. So there were 2 elements, you know, that Alistair pulled out for his Crystal family, basically saying, how big's your team? How important is it what you're building? And these are just 2 criteria that fed into the Agile suitability filter that was published in the Agile practice guide. So this is the Agile Practice Guide cover, another free publication from PMI for its members. You can download a copy. And in the appendix, it has this scoring model where we put things, we score on things like team size and criticality, as well as other things such as how experienced are your team members and do you have access to the customer? Because all of these things would favor an agile approach, whereas perhaps if you can't get access to the customer, or if you're doing life critical development, then out of the box, maybe a plan-driven approach might be more suitable, or maybe a hybrid approach might be more suitable. So the idea is that you score your project based on these project characteristics. And if we were doing, this is from a book I've got called PM Illustrated, and there's an example of doing a horse stable expansion at a petting zoo. And this one is more around the plan-driven side, right? It's a fairly large team, inexperienced people. So this scale is kind of reversed, and this far end is not very experienced. In other words, people need guidance on how to do stuff, right? Trust in the team, the criticality, right? It's a public petting zoo. There's liability, the safety. We've got a plan for this petting zoo. Stable expansion, it's not likely to change. We're just putting up a kit. We can't probably change it very much. And we can't use incremental delivery. We've got to keep people out of it till the construction's finished, and then we can actually go use it, right? So here's an example of perhaps a project that isn't a great fit for Agile, but might be better suited to a plan-driven approach. Whereas some others, this is also an example given of creating a vending machine for pig food. And so we're taking a regular vending machine and we're, allowing people to buy food to go feed the pigs. Sounds fairly straightforward, but there are some regulatory compliance. What happens if the kids eat the pig food? What happens if we overfeed the pigs? All that kind of good stuff. And so when we discuss it, it looks like it perhaps more of a hybrid approach. And the final example in the book is building a badger den webcam. So putting a camera in a badger den, connecting it to a website. And it's very much, a small team software project. We've got some experienced people. We've got people who are willing to review it and give us feedback on what we're building. And, it's a nice fit for a pure agile approach. So you can score your projects. And all of these tools, I think, are really just conversation starters with your project team, right? I wouldn't use any of them as a be-all and end-all of, it's telling us we've got to use an agile approach. No, it's why don't we have a conversation with our team members, with our sponsors, and here's a guidance tool. So we've got something visual to actually point at and have a conversation. All models are flawed, right? But some models are useful. And I think this is an example of a useful model. It helps us have a better conversation, right? And often when we score some of these models, we get these big spikes, right? I've got a case study we'll talk about later, and it was basically writing software for drones. And so the writing software was very agile, but the criticality, it is life critical stuff. So we've got these big spikes, right? And we've got very large teams. So really what we've got here is, it's a hybrid for sure, but maybe it's even, we break it out into sub-teams and manage it that way. So lots of good ways to, I think, have better conversations around some of the characteristics that we feed into the tailoring process. And if you want to play with this model, we've got an online version. You can just go to suitabilityfilter.com, and there's a pilot. It's not perfect, but you can drag the sliders and you can create little diagrams like this, and then you can have a conversation with your team, and if it helps, great. So I think they're useful from a discussion perspective. So hybrid. I don't think it's a terrible thing. I think it's the reality, you know, for most people, as we saw from that survey. And it doesn't have to mean mixing things together, right? Some people think that, you know, we have agile, we have traditional, and if you mix them together, you get something else and that isn't as good. So when you mix beer with lemonade, in England, we call that shandy. And not everybody likes shandy, right? You either like beer or you like lemonade, but you may not like shandy. But that really is a sort of a tyranny of the or thinking around how to use a hybrid, I believe. Because hybrids can be additive, right? So we could use agile for our development that's maybe complex and changing requirements and a lot of uncertainty. And then we could use a traditional approach to roll that solution out to 5,000 users and perform training, right? So high rates of change early on. So let's use Agile for that part. And then well understood rollout. How do we train 5,000 people? Well, we got to batch them up and schedule them and get a trainer in. We can plan that stuff pretty well. So in combination, it's a hybrid, right? So our overall project we would describe as a hybrid. We're using the right approach for the right class of work. So let's look at the class of work and then use the right approach. And I think this is more genius of the and thinking, right? That it doesn't have to mean the worst of both worlds. It doesn't have to mean mixing. It can mean the best of both worlds as well. And so, you know, the recommendations that I like to give are match the approach to the nature of the work, right? High rates of change, uncertainty, likelihood of you know, only knowing it when we see it. Great. That sounds like a perfect candidate for an iterative incremental approach, such as Agile. Whereas something that's defined, repeatable, and can be planned accurately up front, perfect. Let's use a more traditional approach to that. And so I think, yeah, that's a better way to go. And so here we're using Agile and then a traditional approach. Much like if we had a meal, we might have a fish course followed by something different, like a chocolate dessert, right? We're using one approach and then the next. We got our fish course, then our chocolate dessert, because nobody likes tuna chocolate cake, right? You know, that's where you mix the approaches together. And we don't have to do that when we talk about hybrids. It doesn't have to be tuna chocolate cake. It can be a fish course followed by that chocolate dessert. So some examples. I worked at a company called ECGD, Export Credits and Guarantees Department. This was an English government department where they insured business overseas. So if you had an oil rig and you're exporting it to Norway, you could insure that deal and the transportation of the oil rig through the North Sea to make sure that you got paid, or if something bad happened, you still got some compensation. If you were building a hydroelectric dam in Africa, you could insure that deal against currency rate fluctuations and things. So most governments have a export insurance arm. And the trouble was that France was over subsidizing their export credit insurance, and it wasn't really a fair environment for European trade. And so the OECD stepped in and said, we're going to standardize on how we calculate export credit insurance premiums. And so everyone will be on a fair playing field. And they handed out this 200-page calculation specification on how to calculate premium rates for export credit insurance overseas. I was working for IBM at the time. We had the contract to implement the new insurance system. And we used an Agile approach for all of the screens and reports. And then we had a separate sub-team for that calculation engine. It was non-negotiable, right? We had this 200-page specification that needed to be implemented and then plugged into this particular, you know, screen or whatever. And it worked really well by having these two teams working in parallel. We had an Agile team building the screens, getting feedback on the reports, etc. We had that other team working in a more traditional way on the calculation. So it was largely Agile with a traditional component. IBM was the first country and the first system to implement, and then they earned a bunch of money going to go do this in France and Spain and Italy and a number of other countries within Europe to implement the same calculation engine into their underwriting processes. So there's lots of different patterns for creating your hybrid, and some of these are documented in the Agile Practice Guide there. The drone software, this was, it was a partner for Lockheed Martin, and it's actually military drones. So it's a very highly regulated environment. If you want to write software for Lockheed Martin, the security process for getting evaluated and vetted and accepted is very rigorous, right? Lots of security requirements, lots of quality and process requirements. And then once you get accepted and you start writing software, they have lots of additional quality assurance practices and procedures. They appoint independent companies to review your code and everything. And as you imagine, at the back end, there's lots of regression testing and traceability. For every requirement must have a list of tests to make sure you tested that. It's rigorous, but building software at the heart. So what they use is, we call it encapsulated Agile, right? It's like the soft center of this chocolate here. Agile for screen development and reports and risk mitigation and trying new approaches and iterating on things. But it's wrapped in this quite non-agile surrounding layers of upfront reviews and governance and selection. There's independent reviews, so there's additional governance and additional supporting activities. But yeah, the company I was working with, absolutely using an agile approach for 2-week iterations to actually write the software. It's just that they have to, the price of doing business for Lockheed Martin in that space, and quite rightly so, is very rigorous, right? So they encapsulate the agile process in a very non-agile way. And the other company I worked for, NAP Pharmaceutical, this was drug development in a FDA regulated environment. And they had a similar kind of a model, right? That it was agile at the middle, but then there was a bunch of non-agile stuff afterwards. I was brought into NAP to try and lean up their whole development process, but because they have this, you've got to stop development before you start all of your testing and certification. It really meant that we still had that traditional closure on the end. So we ended up, rather than leaning up the whole FDA regulation, we just had this encapsulated agile approach. And they still use it today. It seems to work pretty well for them. But there's lots of patterns for hybrids that don't really mean mixing or diluting the processes. So Agile Practice Guide is a good go-to resource that talks about some of these common patterns, right? So maybe sub-teams, largely traditional with a little bit of Agile, or vice versa that we talked about. Another common one is a veneer of traditional, and quite often project managers play this interference layer between a PMO or a sponsor, where they might be converting progress into earned value, whether it's points or throughput metrics into, oh, we're 80% complete, or we're green, or we've completed phase 3. When there really aren't those phases, they've got that veneer of traditional on there. Or it might be, more of this encapsulation model, right? Where there's a traditional kickoff, maybe there's quite the formal evaluation and return on investment study, and then a formal charter. And then we can let the team go be an agile team. And then at the end, we have to produce a lot of documentation around handover to support or something like that. This might be a model for how you would individually support an agile team in a largely predictive or waterfall organization, right? The bit that's within your control, the actual development, as a project manager, you can support and then the front end and the back end, as you pick it up and then you hand it off, might be a little bit more traditional. Okay, what else we got? Oh yeah, some risks. So what are the downsides of all this? Well, if you've got a hybrid, chances are it's not like everybody else's hybrid. They tend to be unique for each organization, which makes them kind of hard to explain and recruit for, because you can't, hire, oh, I need a developer familiar in, hybrid type 4, right? Everyone has their own. So it takes a bit longer. That's not usually a big deal. You just have to walk people through it. But there are some downsides and potential risks around coverage and sort of breakage I'll talk about, and then a layering overhead. It's also worth examining. So the first one, usually most Agile frameworks or toolkits are a balanced matrix of, supporting activities. This is XP, and it talks about having collective code ownership helps with refactoring and pair programming. Having coding standards also helps with pair programming and collective code ownership. If you decide to take something away, like coding standards or collective code ownership, you're in danger of having other things fail in your little ecosystem, right? So the recommendation is that you should always get familiar with using the approach plain vanilla as first advertised or as described, before you start taking things away. So be wary of removing elements from your approach, right? Don't remove them because they're difficult. Maybe they're difficult because you need to do more of them, not less of them. If it takes you 3 days to deploy to a sandbox environment, maybe you need to get better at deployment as opposed to deciding you're only going to deploy, once a quarter or something like that. So yeah, the warning is, make sure you get familiar with something, plain vanilla version, before you start removing elements from it, right? So that's the removal concern. And then we have the opposite as well, which is the overload concern. So let's say this is our nice Agile process that we've got. We're using sprints. We do coding, testing, and acceptance. We're using user stories, and then we're ready to launch, right? Nice and clean, Scrum inspired, working great for our small team. And then we get told, oh, but can we have a project charter? Okay, yeah, we can have that project charter for you. Oh, and a work breakdown structure, because we like to track things with a work breakdown structure. And a statement of work plan, and stage gates, and a baseline plan, and a signed scope statement. And pretty soon you can see that what we're doing is we're just adding our traditional project approaches on top of our Agile process. And if you add monthly review meetings and a change control board and a steering committee and red, yellow, green reporting, communications plans and a RACI matrix and contracts, no team will be successful in delivering in this environment because you've just given them too much process to actually ever deliver any value from, right? So this is another problem that we see in hybrid environments, that we ask team members or teams to do both worlds worth of process, and that's never going to work either, right? We've got to allow time for actual value delivery. Otherwise, these poor teams will spend all of their time sort of doing compliance work and reporting or standards work as opposed to actual value delivery. So what are some better frameworks then for helping us choose and tune our approaches? Well, PMI has Disciplined Agile, which has the DA browser, and it's a great way of looking at our different ways of working. And here we're just looking at a screenshot, but it's actually an interactive tool. We're looking at the ways of working. And for visualizing our existing process, it says, hey, there's a few common options, right? This is an ordered list. It has an arrow. So maybe a value stream map is the best way to do this. It's the top of a list. But the bolded items show common ways or starting points. So maybe we show our process through a Kanban board. right, or a process model. So it's a nice way to look at different ways of working, see where you're at currently, right? And then look if there's a generally accepted better way that you might want to move to. So you don't have to sort of hire an expensive Agile coach. You can just look at the tool and say, oh, well, maybe this is a good starting point, right? And you can click on it and it will give you a description around it. So Discipline Agile is nice because it supports multiple life cycles. So we've got project-based ones, such as Agile and Lean. We've got product-based life cycles, such as continuous delivery, and a Lean version of that. And of course, Scrum-based, Kanban-based, lots of different ways to slice and dice the approach, as well as, if you want to do serial or predictive, that's fine. You want to do citizen development, sure. That's a valid approach too. So quite inclusive. It also has some scaling factors. So as team sizes grow or you're geographically distributed, how should we adapt our process for that? And if you were to kind of look at the model and click on it, it gives you links. So it's pages of static text that talk about as team size increases, your form team or team activities, you might want to look at the large team guidance, right? So it's kind of static, but there's lots of good information in there. The model that I worked on was called Beyond Agile. So this is another approach out there that recognizes that teams use Lean and Agile ways of working. Teams may also use plan-driven, more predictive ways of working, and they overlap, right? And there's benefits of each, and it's good to learn both. We've also got the whole domain of leadership and emotional intelligence. There's a big overlap with Agile, but there's a lot of good stuff around leadership and emotional intelligence that Agile doesn't tap into, right? So we should be aware of that. And how I came up with the Beyond Agile model was I studied successful teams, and some of them were most of them were using Agile, but a lot of the Agile implementations I saw weren't that successful. And so I went back to look at the very best teams, and they used this savvy mix of different approaches. And the last sort of area was industry-specific approaches. So they learned about the industry and they applied the right approach for that type of project environment. And so the Beyond Agile model says, all of these domains overlap, and we need to build our skills in all of them. And then based upon the project characteristics, our little dotted red line of things that we should be applying probably varies, right? And it's like those other models in that you can grab a slider and it changes the recommendations lens, right? So as team size increases, we do more plan-driven stuff, right? As project criticality increases, we do more industry-specific stuff. And if you've got a lot of requirements uncertainty, great, let's dive into the Lean and Agile stuff, because that's where it really shines. There's guidance around training artifacts as well as approaches, and you can add more sliders. So that was a simple model, but you could add more sliders for how experienced or inexperienced are your team, because they'll need more guidance if they're inexperienced. And how mature are you with your Lean and Agile adoption? So this whole model is driven by a Google spreadsheet. So the idea is that you take the starting point one, but then you add your industry or your company's ways of working into it, right? I've got models that are populated with SAFe, Scaled Agile Framework elements, with DA elements. It's basically, a model that you create for your organization, and then you tailor it as you see fit. And just like all of these models, like I said, with the suitability filter, it's not this is how thou shalt do it. It's really a tool to have a better conversation with your team and your stakeholders and sponsors, right? To say, hey, we've got a large team here, or we've got a lot of uncertainty. What do you think about using this approach? Or the model is suggesting that we we use release roadmaps for this, or we're using different leadership styles. What do you think about that? So it's a prompt to have a better conversation. And you can play with this model as well at beyondagilemodel.com. And the idea is that you download the blank version and then you start populating it with your approach. So remember, though, that process has weight, whereas knowledge is weightless. So just like when we overloaded that Agile team with all the traditional stuff, we've got to get this balance right. Otherwise, there'll be no time left for the team to deliver value. So yeah, make sure we don't have too much process. It's all part of a tailoring for your particular environment. And it would be nice if we could just give people a simple answer about how you should do a project, right? But really, the world is more complicated, and everyone is asking for a pamphlet, and then they fail with that pamphlet. There is no single way to describe how you should organize for your project, because your project will be different than every other project. Better to give people tools like a map so that they can navigate the process and make decisions at all of the different junctions on the way to their destination, right? So not as popular, but answers tend to be complex, but right, as opposed to simple, but wrong. And really, that's what the Beyond Agile book is about. It's about how do we make these decisions and use the best of traditional and lean and agile and emotional intelligence and your industry's good practices to be successful. So wrapping up, we got one more poll, and that leads into what we would like to see in the next edition of the PMBOK guide. So if you could launch that poll, please. Thank you. Okay, this is interesting. Well, thanks for voting. We've got 33 out of 37, 34 now. That's good. And yeah, we're seeing a couple of things, right? So examples on how to implement concepts in traditional agile and hybrid. Yeah, so maybe when we talk about project kickoff or project charter, let's show an example of what a large traditional project charter may look like, and what an agile one may look like. I think that would be useful. And using things like Standards Plus, we could actually have real charters for fictitious projects, if you like. Let's fill them in with the rigor that you would expect in that environment or domain. Also seeing more guidance on how and when to use hybrid. Yeah, I think that would be useful. And a couple of people saying, you know what, just you PMI, PMBOK guide, just leave it alone. Leave us alone as Agilists, right? And stick to your project management, traditional project management. I appreciate that sentiment as well. And when I was writing these out, there's kind of value in all of these things, right? I tend to think that the bottom ones are probably more valuable and serve more people. But yeah, I really appreciate people sharing their thoughts and ideas around this. It's very interesting. So I'm going to stop sharing that and close, and then wrap up this, and we can go into any Q&A. So the PMBOK guide is PMI's sort of signature standard or guide, but it's not the only one that we do. And I think there are some really good ones that people probably don't know about. It's Navigating Complexity Practice Guide. It's a members only one. These have got a little M padlock next to them, means you need to be a PMI member, but then it's free. It's great guidance for working in complex environments, as is this next one, Managing Change in Organizations. We've got lots of good standards and guides that most people don't know exist. So if you're a PMI member, go and browse and have a look. If you're not a PMI member, you know, maybe your company will pay for you to be a PMI member. I think it's worth it. There's some good material there. And even if you are not a PMI member, please consider volunteering for the next standard or guide, right? So this is where you can go to volunteer. And this is where you can look at announcements around standards projects. Because kicking off next year, so it's still a ways away, we'll be starting the research for the 8th edition of the PMBOK guide. And then following that research, there'll be a call for writers and reviewers. The writing, you know, there's like a monthly meeting and there's quite the commitment of time. But if you just want to be a reviewer, get to see the early versions and add your thoughts to that, that's a lot less of a time commitment. So there's lots of opportunities to help shape the next PMBOK guide as well. So yeah, please consider that. We're always looking for good, thoughtful content. And then I just want to wrap up with some of the resources that we looked at today, some of the standards and guides and where the content came from. A lot of it came from the PMBOK guide, some of it came from PM Illustrated and Beyond Agile. But the Agile Practice Guide and Alistair Coburn's Crystal Clear are certainly the origins of a lot of this tailoring stuff. And with that, I am done, and I'm ready to hand it over and talk about some more questions. So I'll hand it back to you, Marco.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. Yes, we got a few questions here in the chat.
Okay,
maybe
perfect.
we can start from top to bottom. From first, we have from Radu, and then we have a follow-up question from that from Ivan as well. So Radu is asking, the question is, how will the PMBOK guide edition 8 look like? I read a little while ago, I complete a survey regarding the 8th grade. The management program standard is already late to appear, so I think there will be changes and maybe a return to the format from edition 6. And then, right to follow up with that, Ivan also comment on that. So I completed the survey to where PMI asked for feedback about including knowledge areas or the DA to the guide of PMBOK 8.
Yeah.
So if we continue to the current model, yeah, what can we expect from the PMBOK guide 8?
Yeah, and I don't have any answers to those yet. I saw those same surveys. So they're asking, yeah, do you want to see some DA content in there? Because we didn't really put much in the 7th edition. But really dependent upon those surveys, people may say no, or they may say yes, and then we've got to figure out how. So these are all great questions about, are we still going to use Standards Plus? What's going to be in the book? And really, we've got to get results back from that research, from those surveys. And then we've got to also merge that with more workshops and more PMI member engagement, right? Long before we figure out what that will look like. So yeah, you're seeing the process starting, but I don't think we have any of the answers yet. Or if we do, I'm not privy to any of them yet.
Yeah, all right. And Radu, Ivan, if you have any follow-up comments on that, please, yeah, you can just like speak up, yeah. Okay? And then in the meantime, Mike, we have from Roy. Roy is saying, from using PMI PMBOK 5, 6 with knowledge areas, how do they fit in the PMI PMBOK 7, the transition process?
Yeah, they don't fit that well, and so we if you're using those knowledge areas, you know, the simplest recommendation is go look at the PGPG, the Process Groups Practice Guide. That's where you'll see the best alignment, right? Because we basically dropped those when we went to the 12 principles and 8 performance domains. I mean, they overlap, but you won't find a one-to-one mapping. It's just a different way of covering everything that you need to do in a project now. And so I tried to map them out when we were building it, and there was just a lot of overlap. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So it fits more than one performance domain. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, yeah. And then we have from Thomas Funge. What is in view the 7th edition? Is there project managers, or is it people who is agile practitioners in different roles or functions?
Oh, I see. Yeah, like what do we call these people now, perhaps? Or who is it aimed at, I guess. So we try to be, as broad as we could. You might be called a project manager, you might be called a project lead, you might be a product manager or lead, right? These are all vehicles for delivering value. I don't think we would call them agile practitioners because that would exclude the non-agile sort of delivery approaches. But we certainly haven't only gone down the road of agile practitioners, right? It's still for traditional project managers, and I think it always will be. I floated the idea of calling it the standard for value delivery, and that was thought a change too far, right? They kept it as the project management body of knowledge. It's not the standard for value delivery. So yeah, PMI, will retain I think project managers for sure. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And once again, folks, in case you need a follow-up comment or questions, please just speak up. And then Mike, from Kai, maybe Kai, would you mind explaining to us a little bit, or should we, Mike? You want to we can just read that?
No, I can try to explain.
Oh,
yeah,
quickly. I'm working quite often in the past, let's say 10, 15 years with companies from the automotive space.
Mm-hmm.
And there you have this typical project duration of like 3 years plus minus. And if you look at the different aspects, it goes from software engineering, electronics, hardware engineering, manufacturing engineering, purchasing. All these different aspects are involved because there's always a serial production at the end. So you have a two-dimensional problem. You have phases over time where you go from trying to be really agile and incorporate change quickly to getting more and more stable towards the start of production. And at the same time, you have at any one of these points in time, you have some aspects that still require highly agile behavior and others that require rather, let's say, stable, more planned or predictive approaches.
Yes.
And with that context, I mean, listening to you earlier, when it came to tailoring of the hybrid, that I always saw a one-dimensional approach only. And I was thinking, do I have to break down the project into multiple projects based on time and aspect? And then you get this patchwork, and every element in there is potentially a different way of working. And it even changes over time. And that to me it goes beyond my cognitive abilities to imagine how that would ever work. So what is your recommendation how to deal with that?
Yeah, that's an excellent example, and I'm really glad that you explained it to us. I'm seeing this a lot, right? And I'm afraid I think it is a two-dimensional solution, right? You're doing different classes of work with different teams at different periods of time. And based on that class of work, some of it will be highly collaborative and high rates of change and uncertainty. And I believe you should use an agile approach there. And then there'll be other portions, like when you create a production line or where the cost of change is very high, right? That is a defined, repeatable, or should be a more firmly fixed activity where you would probably benefit from a more predictive traditional approach. And I think that's what you should use there. So I think it really is going to be a two-dimensional sort of a network or patchwork, as you said, that changes over time. The parallel that I've got is I work with some oil and gas companies, and their upfront stuff, working with geologists and geophysicists where they figure out where the hydrocarbon formations are. It's all subject matter experts coming together to try and solve a problem and then decide where is the best place to drill. It's very agile, problem solving, iterative, and they use a very agile approach that is highly fluid. And then once you start putting steel in the ground, it becomes very expensive to start changing your mind, right? And building pipelines and things is a very defined, repeatable process where they use a very different approach. And then supporting that, we've got sort of legislation and campaigning with the mineral owners and the landowners and working with protest groups, and that's like, and communications are highly dynamic and fluid and have to change very quickly based upon, you know, political and social and environmental concerns. And that's what we built, right? We've got all these different stakeholder groups, and they're all using a different approach based on the class of their work. Some of it's defined, repeatable, and stable. Much of it is dynamic and changing and fluid. And they all have to link and coordinate and work together. And I think this is just the future of work, right? Is that we use, or we should use, the right approach for the class of work, as opposed to one sort of big umbrella or hammer to try and direct everybody, because work is complex, right? And we need that flexibility to change, to be successful. And yet there are periods where that is very costly in manufacturing or many physical endeavors, right? So I think you're on the right track, I'm afraid, with that complicated patchwork for how to do this work.
Yeah. Can I follow up on that?
Yeah, sure.
I try, when I talk about this with other people, I typically make this use this metaphor of like a soccer team. And if what you just said, I'm typically saying it's like having a soccer team that can play at different points in time, different, let's say, structures with let's say 4 defenders, 3 defenders, more offensive, more defensive, more coming over the sides, more coming through the middle, and they switch that in the match depending on the needs.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, most teams only can do that are like Champions League type teams.
Sure.
Or organizations.
Yeah.
When I look at the reality in our industry, we're getting new organizations put together every time we have a new project, sometimes in the middle of the project.
Yeah.
And before I train everyone to be proficiently able to, you know, navigate themselves in that environment, the project is done and the next one comes around the corner. So I think there's a massive impact on how stable we need to keep our organizations if we want to run that type of project.
Yes. And if we hire, you know, contract project managers and product managers to do these high profile deliveries and then let them go, we lose a lot of that sort of knowledge, right? There's a good book, Dynamic Reteaming, as well, that has some good pointers towards changing team types as well. And the unfixed model is pretty good as well, has some nice elements in there around perhaps scaling some of these different work types throughout the single endeavor. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're very welcome.
Yes. All right. We have, let's see what we have. A few more, Mikey. Do you have more time, Mikey, to answer a few more questions?
Sure, I do. If people need to drop off, I totally understand, but I have time. Yep.
Yeah. So let's see from Ellie here. Ellie, would you mind sharing your question or to Mikey directly? Or I'm not sure if Ellie's here, but
Ellie's
okay,
still
maybe can I
Yes.
just go and read them?
I am here.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we hear you, Ellie. Yeah.
I'm thinking about digital transformation. We see digital transformation impacting every side of our lives, and I think the project managers must explore all the sides of this transformation and use it in project management. And I think I don't know why project managers don't use it too much. And in fact, I'm surprised that PMI do not explore this side. What do you agree with me first? And what do you think about this?
Yeah, so I think if I understand you correctly, you're saying that digital transformation is happening, right? And yet project managers seem to be on the slower side of the adoption curve for that, and PMI in general. I agree. Project managers tend to be the older sort of workforce members, I guess, and maybe they might be a bit slower to have adopted these things. But I don't think it's really optional anymore, you know, both for project managers and PMI. Digital transformation is happening more and more. We need to get engaged on this. I absolutely think that PMI is supporting that. You know, they're now pushing artificial intelligence, right? And how do we skill up in that space? There's a new free credential for PMI members around using AI for project managers, and just generally increasing our sort of digital fluency. That was I mentioned it earlier, the future of the profession talks about a digital overlay on all of the talent triangle areas. So how do we get better at leading teams digitally? How do we get better at business acumen in a digital world? You know, and how do we get better at managing our ways of working through remote tools and technology? So I absolutely agree. I think we have been slow. I think it's because, you know, project managers tend to be the older demographic in the team. But it's happening. And as more and more younger project managers who grew up digital move into those roles, hopefully we'll see that challenge, you know, reducing more and more. Does that make sense?
Thank you. Yes.
No, you're very welcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
what else do you have?
Yes, we have we have from Thomas. I guess Thomas asked about the Beyond Agile. So I think Radu already answered about that. If it's a free resource, Radu already answered that is a very good book, and it's not
Well,
the
book is sorry, the website's free. Absolutely, you can go play around with the model for free. I have to charge for the book, of course, because it costs stuff to publish and ship. But yeah, Beyond Agile is free. As an idea, you're very welcome to go use it in your organization. There's no royalties or usage, there's no membership or anything like that. But if you want to buy the book, yeah, the book has a cost. Sure. Well, just to answer some of these other quick ones, I'm happy to make the slides available, and we absolutely should be able to claim PDUs for this too. So yes. And what's my YouTube channel link? I don't have much on YouTube yet, but I will be putting more stuff up there soon.
Yeah.
So nothing there.
There's one last one, Mike. Then, how did you report to your management if you do use a hybrid approach, which would be easier to explain the progress? Please, can you provide an example from your case study?
Yes. So it really depends upon what are they asking for, right? So for a number of years, I would be running interference. I would be managing a team in an agile way, but I'll be in an organization that's not very agile, and they would still want to see work breakdown structures and earned value reporting and things like that. And so I would keep two sets of books. I would work with the team. We would be tracking throughput and you know, points maybe or something like that. And I would just convert that into whatever the PMO was asking for. And what I found was that I could kind of lie with those traditional metrics way easier than I could lie with the, you know, if the team velocity is only 40 points, but we need 60 to get this damn thing finished, you know, it was pretty apparent to me that, yeah, we're behind. Whereas I could still report green or, you know, a CPI of 1 using a traditional approach. So the best approach is to be absolutely transparent and say, hey, we're actually using an agile approach for this project, and we're tracking, you know, using these throughput metrics. And let me walk you through how to do that. But I acknowledge that sometimes we don't have that circle of influence to change everything. And sometimes we just have to give them what they ask for, right? And don't die on that hill in terms of trying to convert everybody. So I think it really depends. I would always try and be transparent and use the Agile metrics first. And then if that doesn't work, maybe convert them to some more traditional metrics that people are more familiar with. And then maybe say, well, here's the old way and here's the new way. And how would you like me to report in future?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, Mike. So there's no more questions on the chat.
Cool.
So
Everyone wants to go to bed or get on with their lives. Yeah.
Or some of us here wants to go for maybe a lunch now, right? Because like depending where you are. Yeah, but yeah, so yeah, right, folks. Yeah, we are near to the end of our meetup, and what a discussion it has been. Yeah, so I would like to extend a huge thank you to Mike for shedding the light about the transition from the 6th to the 7th edition for the PMBOK guide. And also to all of you engaging in such a inspired discussion. So a quick reminder, you can claim the education and professional credit for participating tonight, or also like watch the recording later. We are going to give all the details later on. If you have any further questions, and I don't know if you're for us to keep the conversation going, feel free to reach our meetup page or in our social media. We're looking forward to see you at our next meetup. And yes, and yeah, Mike, thanks a lot.
Very welcome. Thanks very much for having me, and everybody for sticking around and asking great questions and participating in the surveys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, until next time, folks, and stay safe, keep driving your projects, and yeah, have a great evening or a rest of the day wherever you are.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
bye-bye.